Welcome to Office Hours. Welcome, everybody. Let us know in the chat what you are studying or what you are teaching. Today is all about academic productivity. We're here with Monica and Russell, who are research partners. I'm super excited. I've seen a lot of Monica's setups, and she is often hashtagging Notion for Academics. So that's kind of been her focus. And I'm just really excited to see your space, Monica. So why don't you give us a little bit of the lay of the land, how you guys have been using Notion, maybe how long you've been using Notion, because I feel like you're a pretty advanced user, and I know you guys are sort of using it to manage your whole lives. So why don't you give us the lowdown on your intro to Notion.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for having us, Marie. We're really grateful to chat with you and with everyone that's here today. We've been really excited to see some names I recognize in the chat, so that's been fun. Awesome. So I've been using Notion officially since January. I actually looked recently. You know what, though? I wish I could say November, because it's told me I downloaded it like Thanksgiving weekend in November. But I remember hearing about it, I actually think from like a Katie Linder podcast. And she had mentioned it, and I was like, oh, this sounds cool. And then, you know, holidays and everything else, and I didn't really get to it. But then I started using it in January. I started thinking about how could I stop using the variety of other tools that I was using. I'm a tech geek. For a little bit of background, I am an assistant professor and the director of institutional research and training at Goldie Beacom College, which is in Wilmington, Delaware. Rusty's also there. So Rusty, say hi and what you do.
So I'm Rusty Mahalik, and I direct the library and learning center at Goldie Beacom College. And kind of to echo what Monica said, I think she first announced that she was going to use Notion in November, and then, you know, life just kind of happened. But I know that she was playing around with it a while before we introduced it to our staff. So there was a lot of screenshots shared via text and other places that like, look what I'm doing. Like, that's interesting. Let's wait until we share this with the staff. But it'll look awesome when we get to that point. So, yeah, we started using it in January. But once we launched it, we went full force.
That feels like a common sentiment, where it feels like you kind of have to build it out, get it a little bit more advanced before you can kind of bring new folks in, because otherwise people are a bit skeptical. They're like, yeah, another tool. Okay, what's this all about, right?
Well, and in fairness, I might have had him hop over a few tools in the last couple of years. So I think we've actually put it together since 2014. So I think in the early days, it was like Office 365, Google Docs. And then I might have said, hey, let's try Basecamp, because I'd used Basecamp at Penn State when I was there for my PhD. We used that for a while, but honestly, I've always found there's some cool things you can do with it, but it gets a little bit clunky when it comes to interacting with Cloud Drive files. So we would struggle with that a little bit. And then we really jumped all in with Airtable. We were using it for quite some time. And then I saw Notion, and I was like, we're going to this. I know I promised no more tools, but we're going to
I think you're missing one of the tools that we used in between, which was Smartsheet. So then we also had that, and then there's always been something, but Monica's done a good job of testing things out at home before we actually have to go into it. But this one is probably the first one. And she's like, you are using this, and it was exciting.
It has been decided.
She's right. We've used so many different things, but we always use them all so many different things simultaneously. But this is the first time we're not using like 16 different tools where we have to toggle back and forth. We stay with SharePoint just because that's what our college uses, but we can link to everything from there. So everything's in one place, and communication is in one place for the first time out of this last 6 years that we've been working together. So that's really neat.
Huge.
And I'm noticing a lot of people in the chat talking about kind of the different roles that they have. So it's really cool to see so many faculty here and people doing different things for their studies and that sort of thing. We are combining a variety of things in Notion. So when we show you our workspaces today, the different things we're combining are, for example, what we call our scholarship dashboard, which is what I'm going to show you. Rusty's going to walk through what we use with our teams. And for some context with our teams, we're running several departments between us. So I run institutional research and training, but training is actually faculty development and staff training. So we have a lot of different department kind of bells and whistles there and different people we're engaging with. Rusty handles the library, the learning center, and the archives. And until COVID, our departments were actually operating out of the same space, which was the library. So we had a lot of crossover with both physical location and people. And then also I'm an assistant professor. So I had all my students too. I haven't actually fully brought students into the Notion ecosystem though, although now that, EDU has been free for a while with Notion, but now that we're all remote, that's my next step. So talking about future. Yeah, it's only a matter of time until I'm like, undergrads, let's go, Notion. But so right now we're handling our scholarship, our research, everything for our departments. And I also do all my personal stuff because I watched your videos, Marie, early on and love your class. And your Notion Mastery course is fantastic. I would totally plug that. You're welcome. It's great. No, it's really
didn't
great.
Pay her to say that.
No, totally didn't. It's fantastic. And I really jumped in on early on with the whole idea of like a Monica HQ, which is like what Maria has with the Maria HQ. And just the concept of tracking everything in my personal life and also my professional and family life too. And it just has really made me much more organized.
Amazing. And just to let the folks know, if you have a question, don't forget to use the ask a question area below so we don't miss it. I'll definitely keep my eye on the chat if anything kind of comes in. But yeah, if there's anything that you want to know about their setup as she's moving through the space, just add it to that ask a question area below. So
I can go ahead and share my map. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen
share. Let's do it.
I feel like I should warn everyone earlier that I did this wonderful thing where I closed everyone out and I thought I was doing it properly and was not. So I'm just
what happens if I click this X?
Yeah, then it means you close it out. So I will not do that. Okay. So can we see my scholarship dashboard now, I hope?
Brilliant. Yes.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. So what you're looking at right now is the main hub of where we go to work with everything having to do with scholarship. And for some context, scholarship to us means everything that we are researching, everything that we're writing, and everything that we're presenting. So the last couple of years, most of our work has centered on topics related to information literacy, academic libraries, specifically management in academic libraries, but also some assessment concepts, learning analytics, both from the students and education in general, but also from the academic library learning analytics perspective. Rusty, am I forgetting any topics?
No, I think that you have all of them.
Okay. So our scholarship dashboard, we started using table of contents somewhat recently. So if you haven't used the table of contents feature, shout out for table of contents because it makes it so much easier when you have pages that seem to scroll on forever. So we've added a talk at the top of almost all of our pages. You would think as academics, we'd be like, that's the first thing we would do, but that's just not something we figured out. I think I accidentally clicked on it one day. I hide subpage links inside of different, I nest them in toggles because something that I figured out early on is when you have subpages that you've created off of a page is you have to have subpage links on that main page, unless Marie knows of a way to hide this. I didn't know of a way to make them go away, so I hide them in a toggle. So that's what I do because I prefer to work off of my sidebar with things, but I have them here and then sometimes I add others as well. You'll see copious use of color and emojis. Rusty, do you want to say anything about how I am with emoji and highlighting?
There is not something that she can't find an emoji for, and she thinks it makes it a lot easier to find things. But for some of us, it's interesting, and sometimes she has a very interesting choice of emoji for something. Like the flowers, I don't know how that relate to something, but that's okay. You have to be open-minded.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a running joke that the more enthusiastic I am, the more emojis and highlights that are there. And he's been very, yeah, I definitely color code stuff. Yeah. So, and as far as calendars are concerned, I have two main databases that this page works off of. So there's a projects database and there's a tasks database. In other areas of our Notion space, we have more, but we wanted to keep it simple with us because we essentially, when I brought on Notion for the two of us, I had been in it longer than Rusty, and I didn't want to overwhelm him with like 5,000 different databases and have him say I didn't want to do it. So I wanted to ease him in, and he's still doing it and still likes it. So I took a good approach here, I think.
And also think with the calendar thing too, I think that can be a tricky thing when people are first learning. They're like, why don't these things that I put in other calendars, why aren't they all visible in one calendar, right? So that's just one of those funny limitations of Notion. So yeah, I'm all for how do we create the simplest
exactly path. Just the easiest way to get to things. And I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of how calendars currently work in Notion. I think that they're going in the right direction, but I'm not thrilled with it yet because it doesn't integrate with Outlook. And for example, we use Outlook predominantly. We use Google too, but since everything for us is off of Microsoft hosted Exchange, I would like to be able to bring in that content. So right now it's a bit duplicative to have to put it in here too. But as long as we have dates associated with projects and tasks, it works. This is what I'm going to call very tongue-in-cheek. This is what's called COVID because there is nothing on the calendar because of like 100%. Now, there are things on the calendar, but what I mean to say is normally we would have an awful lot of things on here about physical conferences we were preparing for. A lot of things are migrating to online. So as a result, we have things that are happening in the back end, which just means that we're still trying to figure out when some of those dates are. So some of that's not here. But what you can see with here, for example, I am using, because with calendars, you can choose calendar by, and the calendar by is event. It could do event dates or it could do due dates. If I switched it over to due dates, actually some things show up with things that we're doing here. I have it by default on here just simply as calendar by due dates, or excuse me, event dates, because that's typically what we like to see with that. I noticed a question came in about, can multiple calendars be displayed together in one view? In my experience, one view, meaning one view here and having two streams into the same calendar, no. Unless there's a different way Marie has discovered. The way I typically do that is I just offer another calendar below. So this is a tasks calendar, and it's running off of our scholarship task, and you can always see the name of the database at the top of the calendar. So that's how I know where it's coming from. A note emoji, so you can find it. Rusty will eventually agree that means find it.
Those little touches matter.
Yeah.
It makes it look much prettier.
Thank you. So, but yeah, we have our tasks that are here too. We use the calendars minimalistically for it. I like to look at it from the perspective of what's coming up. Like, what do we have that we have to make sure we're doing? But again, we're really much more fans of using things that are integrated with other systems that we have as far as calendars are concerned. Mm-hmm. So CFPs, calls for proposals, CFPs are huge in like academia, air quotes on purpose. That's how we tend to do our most productive work. So if I was leaving a nugget for anyone who's like, I wish I had a more robust scholarly pipeline, it's someone who wants to write and publish more prolifically. Start trolling for CFPs. That has been instrumental for us to find things, and we don't do them as much as we used to because now we've established different areas where we write and we have ongoing data collection. So it's easier for us. But if you're just getting started, looking in your area for what presentations, what conferences, what edited collections, what chapters are being asked for different projects, and then you can submit for them. It's basically like a mini job interview. You fill out the app and you say you want to submit on this topic. And then if you're accepted, you can write it. And you have this kind of dedicated timeline associated with it when the article or the chapter or the book is due to the editor or the publisher. And if you're just getting started, we found, and Rusty, I'd love for you to chime in here, it made us much more intentional and productive than if we were just like, it's a Tuesday, what are we going to write about?
I think that looking for CFPs has helped us maintain our core job functions as administrators, but also stay academic and do scholarly work. And so we can find something if we're looking at home and using the web clip for Notion, and we find something and we can put that in a CFP in Notion, and then it's there and we don't have to deal with it immediately or try to remember or remind ourselves later. So putting the call for proposals in Notion has helped us stay on track and not forget some things. Because before Notion, there was times like I would write to Monica and like, did we submit to this? No.
It's all up here, right? Yeah.
So now it's all in Notion, and we haven't a long time now. Even it's sparser than it used to be, and then we used to have in other tools, but it's kept us. But we haven't missed anything, so that's been great.
Yeah. And for example, like with the scholarship projects here, there's a couple of different things that we're looking at. So what this is showing, this is a board view, and we also have a table view, but the board view is just filtered to say if it's a CFP or it's a CFP event, because that for us might be a conference, it might be a workshop, it might be another speaking engagement, or if it's just a CFP in general, meaning it could be a chapter, an article, etc. Things we haven't started yet, but are on our timeline. This, for example, I think Rusty will have to tell me, arbitrary date. Did we miss this one, or was this one you wanted me to do it by?
That's one we decided not to do. So sometimes we keep track of those things, and so that sometimes we just decide that we have too much on our plate, but it was a good thing to keep track of. So things that I say that we haven't missed anything, but that was intentional too.
Yep. No, and what's really cool about this is we keep everything in here. Generally speaking, we don't delete entries. And that way over time we can see these are all the things that we're not showing with columns. So like watch for next year, did not submit. It's sometimes really interesting to see what we choose not to submit for. And there are different reasons, right? So if I take COVID off the table, just reasons that that we've used in the past, not interested, time conflict, money, like we have a certain cap, things like that.
And I think, but it also keeps us track of, or maybe the pitch that for that year wasn't good. We didn't have anything to match it, but it looked like a conference we wanted to go to in the future. So it allowed us to keep track of it. We have one that we submitted to for digital learning services, or distance learning services in libraries. And last year we didn't want to submit to it, but this year, because we kept track of it over there, this did not submit. We were reminded that, oh yeah, we should submit to it this year.
More relevant now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this way, it keeps it in one place. And if we started to develop an app and maybe we chose not to do it for whatever reason, we can reuse some of those words next time. So it's something that we're like, we didn't put all that time or investment into doing something and then we didn't get anything out of it. So if people are curious, go ahead, Rusty.
We keep all of our proposals in Notion now. And so before we would keep it in SharePoint, and if we had a different naming convention, we might lose it or something, or it went into a different folder, or we couldn't remember what folder it was. Now anytime we put when we submit something, we put it in Notion so that we can keep track of it. So we're doing a workshop in October, and on pivot tables, and we were able to, because we put it in Notion in last year, we were able, probably right when Monica started Notion in November, she promptly put that in there, and we were able to find it again and basically rinse and repeat. Whereas before we would have to spend a whole bunch of time trying to find that and then rewrite it if we couldn't find it. But now we were able to just look for it in one place and grab it and submit for the same workshop.
Yeah, and it just makes it so much simpler. And what I love about, so my favorite view, and this makes me sound super geeky, but hopefully I'm with my people here so they understand. So my favorite view is a gallery view across the board, always. I love gallery views. Yeah. And in fact, it's a rare thing that I don't have a cover page perfectly picked out for every single one, so I can see pretty, but in our scholarship projects, knowing I'm sharing this with Rusty, I try to do that a little bit less sometimes. But
not really.
Yeah, I mean, and with properties, we'll see a lot of properties that aren't presented here. So for example, I'm just showing the link. And what I love about that is you can put the link here. And when you have the link here, you can click it. That was something I figured out pretty early on, is if you can actually click on it. So it's some of the things that are just like they're displaying things, but you can't do anything with it. That's not really valuable for me unless I needed to see something to kind of remind myself, like a date or something like that. You'll also see a lot of relationships to things that might not be things that are necessarily up right now. And so some explanation as to what that is. So these 90-day plans and like Monica's scholarship areas or meetings or things like that, these are within my workspace that's not shared with Rusty. So these are different things that I have that roll up into my weekly and daily journals, so I can see the different things that I worked on every day. So that's why there's like a lot of different connections to different things that are there. But it's nice because you can toggle them on and off and see or not see them.
We had a great question come in from Gray about, do you integrate other apps besides calendars in your work? I'm thinking you must do your writing in other apps. Would like to see how you integrate docs and such in your process.
So we don't integrate in the sense that I don't embed a Google Doc and like right here, physically right here. I could, but we predominantly write in Word simply because we're an Office 365 shop at our college. There isn't a really nice native embed. I could go through like, I think it's like Notion Super or something like that, and like figure out ways to like have an iframed in thing and do it and that sort of thing. But I honestly prefer to have things pretty compartmentalized when it comes to working, in the sense that if I'm writing, I'm writing. If I'm reading, I'm reading. If I have Notion up and I'm working, if I were to be working, I think within my Notion space in a doc, I think I'd have shiny syndrome and go down this rabbit hole of, oh, but look, I could track how many steps I have. An emoji. Look, I could totally see myself going down that path.
Or you could be all the time.
Yeah, and of the two of us, generally speaking, we have divvied up kind of projects like this. Like we both work on the whole project, whatever it is, together. But Rusty is definitely the literature review guy, and I'm the data results person. And we come together for the discussion conclusion. So for that kind of workflow, we definitely have times when like he's in deep work with writing and reading and that sort of thing. I'm doing data analysis, or I'm collecting the data and looking at surveys and things like that. And then we're writing together. But as far as like an integration directly within Notion, we have just found it to work better for us to be super compartmentalized with what we're working on. It just makes us more productive, especially because I should point out, we both have faculty titles, but we are like 90% administrators, and I teach, but like I have one course a semester because it's very intentional that I want to be in the classroom. I enjoy it, but we have a lot of administrative duties. So all of the stuff we do that's research oriented is actually on our own time. So we do that outside of the college work. So we have to be really super intentional with how we do things. So I hope that helps address the question a little bit.
That's great. Yeah, Grace said deliberate constraints to add focus. That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. And if I scroll down a little bit, and then I'll shortly switch over to Rusty. So conferences accepted and intending, but not yet complete. So these are basically, if you want to think about it like an on deck sort of thing, and it'll expand in just a moment. We have some things that are coming up. For example, Charleston was a big one that we do every year, the Charleston Library Conference. Unfortunately, it will be online. I will miss all of the tasty food and people and everything else that goes along with Charleston, but it will be online. So I'm grateful we're still pivoting to online. We're giving a workshop, pivot tables for librarians. And some of you might get a kick out of this. I've taught pivot tables for like 20 years. I teach, someone else said that they did this in the chat. I teach Microsoft Office to undergraduate students. I taught web design for high school students for years, but I've been in higher ed exclusively teaching Office courses. And pivot tables to me were like old hat. Like I didn't really understand that they were a new thing for some people. And I know that sounds like super privileged position to be in. It was just, I was so used to doing it. Like
that was your world.
Yeah, I've been doing it since 2001. I taught high school kids how to do it. And then Rusty's like, I think librarians would like pivot tables.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing the workshop last fall and it was a hit and they asked us to do it again. So it went really well. But it's just, it's kind of funny how if you step back and think about what's easy for you. So maybe in this case, like Notion, some things I do, or I know what Marie does looks advanced. We don't think it's advanced because we do it all the time. But when you take a moment to step back and think about how many steps do I actually have to do it, but I don't necessarily make them visible. I think figuring out the gap between the steps and the product is what helps people learn.
Yeah.
And here are some different things. Are pivot tables possible in Notion? I wish they were, but I don't think so. I've seen some plugins that do graphing. Haven't had a lot of success with those, to be honest. I would still reach for other things like Tableau or SPSS for my analysis stuff before I would go to Notion for doing something like that. I would take a really quick screenshot and drop it in if I wanted to show something that we were working on. And this is just the quick display of what we have coming up. Location, online due to COVID. Some things that have changed. It was a really interesting dialogue that came out when the pandemic hit for academics in particular, because people wanted to know, well, how do I put on my CV? I was accepted to speak at this important conference, but it was canceled. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm not going. And I think Rusty even said that didn't APA adjust how you can cite that?
Yeah, the APA came out with basically saying what I think actually the wording that Monica used, online or canceled due to COVID. So I think you change the wording just a little bit, but canceled due to pandemic or something. So that's a new thing that people added to the CV. So it was just a change, definitely a major change.
One of the things we like to make sure that we do is connect everything together too. So generally speaking, we have tasks connecting to projects and vice versa, simply because we like to be able to go to one project and see all the tasks that were associated with it. And we like to be able to go to the tasks and make sure that we have stuff grouped with the right project. That comes into play even more so when we're working with our team members, because we're trying to look and see where people are with different things. This is just an example of some of the things we have and we're considering for next year, like a distance learning poster session. This is slated to be in Seattle in April, I think, but we'll have to see what happens with that. And then some of our service work. I'll be honest, I don't know if any of you have this happen to you. Do you ever make a list of all your commitments and all the things you're doing? And once you list it out, you're like, how did I get myself into doing all of this? That moment when you're like,
one for Monica, because there's so many times that we get an email from somebody and like, you're expected to do this next week. And like, we are. And so we worked together a while ago and we put this together, and it helped us organize what we were doing and what our roles were for each of these committees that we somehow signed up for. Got someone convinced us to do.
Yeah, so we're doing an awful lot of committee work, as you can see here this year. I'm excited and grateful to be doing all of it, and especially it's one of those kind of, am I really doing this moments, not just because of the workflow, but also because I'm not a librarian. I grew up around libraries. My mother was a librarian. My mom knew Rusty before I did. Delaware is a small state. But I just became passionate about it. And there was such a crossover with our research areas of interest with educational technology and libraries that I really found my academic home, so to speak, in libraries. So it's just really ironic to me to be seeing all these different leadership roles on national and international organizations. We're very fortunate. So it's going to be an exciting year ahead. But that kind of brings me to the end of mine. I'll close out mine. Rusty, if you want to switch over to the staff dashboard that we use. And I didn't hang up.
We did it. That's awesome. Does anyone else have any questions about what they saw in Monica's setup? It was really cool. So it's mostly just the two of you collaborating on that side of things.
Yeah, and we've done that pretty intentionally from the aspect of, and someone mentioned like own time, what's that in the chat? That made me laugh. I'm like, yeah, I know we don't have a heck of a lot of it. Fortunately, I don't sleep a lot, so that's made it useful. But yes, just the two of us are the ones that are working in that.
We every once in a while we'll bring somebody in, but generally we try to keep our projects for this kind of stuff together because we've decided that we're going to be presenting and publishing together for a while. Cool. So if we have other things that I don't think we actually have brought in. We have one person in particular we have worked with a lot, but we haven't brought that person in since our time with Notion, since we adopted Notion. So this is our staff page. This is our dashboard. As Monica mentioned before, we both co-supervise an employee. So we had a lot of different ways that we communicated with that person, but in November we were using Slack, and we had a lot of face-to-face meetings, one-on-one meetings, which is kind of common to do in academia. But then projects kind of, for us, have over the years kind of bled together, and we do a lot of things in a lot of projects together that are for the entire college. And so we didn't have a really great place to keep track of everything that we did. So Notion has really helped us with knowing everything about our teams, because I supervise more people than she does, including student workers, and she has her team and that we share, and then there's other people that she works with, research assistants, and then her students. But the point of all of that is that this was the thing that made Monica the most happy, is when we put in work in, because there'd always be in the Slack message in early in the mornings, like, who's working today? I don't remember who's working today. So we had, and of course she has her little clock. That's important. And so we integrated our calendar here. And so now we have a better sense of who works where and when. You can see our names here, but then our people, and you can expand and close that way.
Well, and one of the funny things about this is, and I'll interject here just because I mentioned that there wasn't this Office 365 integration. And if there's any, and I'm going to say really geeky, because I think you'd really have to be geeky to understand this more than me. Anyone really geeky here might have got to understand what I was trying to do. So we have hosted Exchange, but we are not on the newest version. My husband's feeling horrified right now because he's the director of IT. So they're not there yet. They will be on the newest version, but we're not there yet. What this means is that I can't publish a calendar to a web dev server so that we could bring it in through a URL. So I actually investigated going on Amazon AWS and publishing my own calendar through Office 365 through here. And 5 hours later, I decided maybe I should just put it in a Google Calendar. It's not that big of a deal. So yes, I went down the rabbit hole of figuring out how to do that when I could have just done this. So sometimes it's simple.
It sounds like a developer brain. It's like, oh, let me spend 20 hours to do a thing to save me an hour, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But the Google thing works, and it loads fairly nicely on my phone too. So despite, sometimes embeds don't look great, but I actually found that it works pretty well just by embedding it here.
And Alba was just asking, can you edit this G calendar from Notion, or would you have to kind of click on it and be taken to
we have to click it and go into Google. So it's really more of just a view, because I can change some of the things about the settings. I can go from month to month, and I can change the week view and that sort of thing. But I have to do it all, any edits that I make on the Google side, which is fine. Once we, generally speaking, figured out we were working remotely, the schedules have been pretty consistent. Now, as we go through the different phases of reopening, I'm sure they'll change. But
that's cool.
Yeah. It's good to keep track of what we used to do in the past. This is a good way to keep track of what our hours were kind of in the beginning part of.
We used to actually put it in manually like this with tables, and then everyone had picked their own icon, and that was kind of fun. But then we were in emergency mode, and we just needed something fast, so we switched.
And then there was also a time during COVID where we we had no idea when people's schedules would change all the time. So it allowed people to modify their schedules and have a little bit more control in their life. So it was a good way to do that and they could do it in Notion rather than going into Google Calendar and share that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back. So tools we use, this is great for our onboarding. As Monica said, we do, one of our research areas is onboarding. And so tools we always had a problem with when probably 3 or 4 years ago, especially when people were like, we have so many tools. I think I run about 280 different databases with 14 different vendors. Monica has at least 14 major products that she works on. So we have tools we use and how to get to them. And so this is a little brief case of course, that makes sense.
It's a toolkit.
Anyway, there's not a cover here, so but this is really helpful with onboarding. So as people come on and we share employees throughout the college as well. Sometimes we're fairly leanly staffed. This has allowed us to keep everything that we need in one place, and so that we can get to it. And it's fairly simple, but and we do that intentionally because I think that without that many tools, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that we have everything in one place.
That's
and one
great.
of the things we won't go down. I'm sorry, Marie, go ahead.
Oh, I was just curious, how deep do you go into some of these pages as well? And is it like, here's how to use this tool, or here's how to set up a new course? Just curious how in depth you go.
Exactly. So I'll say, Rusty, I won't have you click on stuff just because a lot of that has passwords.
Privacy,
so,
yeah.
That's what I have. Sorry.
Yeah, but generally speaking, the way it works is that we have a quick introduction, and we use a lot of toggles with this. So we have a quick introduction of what's the tool, why do we use it, and who can use it? Because there are different levels of what can be used. So for example, ConvertKit. So if people aren't familiar with it, it's very simple to like MailChimp or MadMimi. It's an email distribution client. Rusty and I can send. One of our assistants can send, but some like student workers cannot send just because it can send to like the greater community and everyone across our college. So we have different layers of approval with that, but we might explain, well, here's how you get into the tool. Here's how you make a broadcast draft, those sorts of things. And we embed Loom videos right inside of Notion, which makes it super easy for people to watch. We've recently actually started embedding Panopto videos inside of it. Panopto is a video, cloud-based video, like a content management system for education. And we get really good analytics with that. Like Loom would show us views, but we can actually see to what extent people watch with videos. And they can actually comment at the point in time on the video with a question. And that still shows up and works in Notion, which is really cool.
Yeah, the removal that we do, it doesn't have any database in there that we have had, is that we use this electronic resources master list and that we've been working on. So we use Wakelet, and Monica's going to kill me how I pronounce that because I have a very Midwestern accent that I can't fix. But we added that Wakelet, and so we wanted to make sure we create we use Wakelet to basically do as a kind of project task list to make sure that we've added them to the different resources to display to the public. So we like the board. It's helped a lot. So I want to go back, see one other one that we use a lot. So it's just a daily workflow is pretty good, but probably the one that we are in almost every day is our staff request list, and this has totally changed our life during the pandemic. And so this is where Monica was saying we give our instructions here, and then we have kind of a basic table, but it has a lot of it's very it can be very complicated. So we have who is requested by, and my new favorite one is that Monica just loves has her crafts. And so she's been bothering me for some years now. And I should put a Christmas tree here, but yesterday we had one of our employees do, we're going to create book covers and create Christmas trees and then make it a digital thing for outreach later on. So we're going to take all the book covers that we've been tearing apart for the last about a year and a half as we open up the stacks. And this really actually should be like high but not urgent because we're going to be doing that soon. And who's going to be doing this? So it keeps things more transparent. What the task is, last updated. Let's see, status review requested, which has been really helpful for us for communication purposes, rather than just getting these emails that don't always stay together. We have someone request a review and then review complete. I like let's see. the due dates. So I found out the due dates here, if I can get this to do it properly, is I did it yesterday, but basically we can now set reminders.
Mhm.
And this is one of our employees was saying, what happens if I can, in Notion, do you think that we could actually have reminders? I'm like, and you can do that. So it'd be great. And she wanted 3 days, but the closest we could do was 2. So we started doing 2 days reminder. And so that's made her super happy. So Notion can do that, and it's great.
Well, and it's fun too because our employees are starting to request things that they want, because we won't get too much into the individual employee stuff, but we created dashboards that would show us all of the tasks for all of our employees that we could filter by each person, but then they could enter their own tasks into their own tasks database that was filtered for them. And so then we can see from like a bird's eye view, here are all of our people, what's going on, well, who's done what, and where things are with different projects.
And I think like any table that we ever had and have for whether it's like Smartsheet or anything else that we ever used before, it just becomes very long and you just scroll down and scroll down and scroll down. But the great thing about is views in Notion. So we have this first requested, last updated, and I think when Monica knows much more about these adding these formulas in here, because I'm not going to ever add any formulas. So I think Monica is going to talk a little bit more about that. I was like, we can do that? Really? That's great. Go ahead, Monica.
And I wish I could make you think that I'm like a really fancy formula person. I straight up copied that from somewhere, and I can't remember where. So I can't give credit here, but what I'll say is what I thought would be interesting is, well, we're capturing when we've inputted this, which is like the manager requested date. I'd like to see how long it's been since I asked for something, when the last touch was on the item, when the last update was. And this wasn't from, and I see Danny in the chat. I know Danny is a Formula Ninja. So if I were to like share our Notion database with you, I'm wondering if you might be able to make it really fancy for us. Lots of formulas. Perhaps there might be some kind of bartering we can do here.
Do a live stream,
Yeah, definitely. But what we were able to do is just at least figure out, how much time has passed. And to be clear, it's not just from like, it's not 100% a punitive sort of thing. There is a punitive aspect to it, but it really has to do with, sometimes I forget that I asked someone to do it, and like other projects happened, and we're kind of balancing a lot of different things, especially with the pandemic. Our college was 98% about face-to-face before this. We had no online courses, and we had like 3 hybrid. And then my office in like a week had us online because we managed all of that. So there's just been a lot of projects we had to do with that. So it was helpful for me to see that there were several things that really came to a screeching halt when March 15th happened. And then I wanted to see, now that things are, if not calming down, but becoming more of like the current normal, I could see which things were kind of left on the back burner, and then we could come up again. So it's been nice to filter and sort by that. But I straight up copied that formula from somewhere else. So I'm pretty good, which is one of the things I think is cool about Notion. If you can see the basic values, you can probably figure out how to do it yourself, in the sense that, okay, well, I know the file name has to match, or the property name has to match, including if I put an emoji in there and I have 2 spaces between it, I have to make sure that's So my hack with that is I just click on the name of the field and I copy it, as opposed to trying to type in and remember how many spaces. I just copy it. But I'm definitely not a ninja when it comes to formulas. So, but I see that Dan's over there, so we might ask him to help us too.
Some of the other views that we have is pending. So that other one was more for us, but the pending also has been pretty good. So depending on what we're looking for that day, I think it's hard to scroll down and try to decipher everything that's in that table. But with all the different views that we have, like pending, ready for review. So I know if I start my day, I'm going to go to ready for review. I'm going to look at this and say, oh yeah, this is something I can actually accomplish today and get that done. It's pretty, most of that's pretty simple. And then we can also see what's not started, which is not too much, which is good. But that also tells us, it just gives us a better sense of when we need to assign projects to different people. And then, as we said before, we have employees who we share and people who are different. So everyone has different access to this, or different purposes for this. So there's Monica's requests. That's good for her employees, and they can look at this, and also for herself. And then there's
I'll add to this, Rusty, is like, if anyone's thinking about using this with a team, particularly, in a work context or just, ad hoc teams, having one place to send people to makes your life so much easier. But also from I am someone who has not been a manager for that long. I've been a manager for a couple of years, and I was the person who was usually saying, I don't want to be a manager. And it had nothing to do with the fact that I didn't want to be in charge of things, but I didn't want to be the person who was constantly, essentially, I didn't want to be a micromanager because I have, especially being in a lean institution where we are now, we are doing and we're managing. And oftentimes, the higher up you go in an organization, you're doing different types of things, right? So you're doing more of the strategic development, the forward-focused thinking, the predicting, and those sorts of things. At small institutions, you're often still doing things that are in the weeds. It's just a different amount of things. So sometimes I was not as clear on how much I might have asked some of my assistants to work on. This has made it very transparent of, okay, I've given her like 60 things. I need to stop giving her stuff. And I need to check in with, how are you feeling about this? And my primary assistant is fabulous and she's wonderful about all of those things. But it just brought to light, it made me a better manager using Notion because I was able to see clearly what I had asked, when I had asked it, and how I had communicated it. Because if I had put, everything's urgent, then I might want to redefine my definition of urgent and decide like what it meant. Like, just because I'm having a mini panic attack about it doesn't mean it's actually urgent. So it's helped me be a better manager by helping, like, I can reflect on how I've asked, when I've asked, and how often I ask. So those things have really helped.
That as a manager, because I've been managing for people for the last 10 years. And I think Notion has really just changed everything in terms, I've never been a micromanager, but we've had different ways of trying to communicate with staff in different ways. And there's never been a time where someone has not been confused at some point, because I want to show you a project here. And this has helped us both to delegate better. And so we know that we have our projects to do, but once you go in there and it allows us to actually then communicate and ask questions right in here instead of opening up an email and try to communicate in this way and that way. And we have date and time stamp, and that's really been really helpful. And it's on here, but then there's ways to then any communication we do have, our documentation, and we can just easily add it here, and it's great. We can just put that there. And of course, anytime you're demonstrating anything, you can't find one that you actually put in there. But that's right.
No, it just makes it a lot easier to be able to open up projects, have the comments right with it. I will say, because Rusty's mentioned that we use Slack too. We have the Notion integration with Slack. It's okay. In the sense that here's why. It's nothing on Notion, it's nothing on Slack, but it's just another thing to go ding, 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 and for me to pay attention to. It's actually a running joke now with the team that I have everything turned off alert-wise in Slack because we use it like chat. Like, those of you that used AIM back in the day, or Skype chat or things like that, like it was constantly going to do with the little chirpy noise, and it was just driving me batty. So I have made it completely quiet.
That she didn't know what screen it was coming from.
Yeah. So, I mean, to have it integrate with Slack is interesting for other people that are not me. So like for my staff, I like to check at the updates channel and see, oh, okay, that person did this. I saw some movement on a project. That's a nice quick look for me. I'm just gesturing at my other monitor. It's a nice quick look for me. It's not something that I would say I spend a lot of my day in. So I know that there's more and more integrations with things like that. But I just think the more levels of things to check, the more friction is introduced to projects. And for me, I'd rather focus on getting it done.
And I think it's great because here's a project that we were working on, and it's great. One of our employees figured out just put the toggle there and put the link to the different things that we need right here, and she can outline. And it's been great. It's wonderful to just have it all in one place.
A question that popped up was, are these requests converted into tasks later on? Like I guess you have your master task database or whatnot. So what happens?
So no, I perfectly understand the question, and my expression. I think I should explain my expression. My expression is today, when we were preparing for this, I was taking a look at some things, and I was like, I realized our master task database is not really getting updated. I wonder what's going on there. So we have had this subtle shift from the very employee-driven, but based on emails that we'd send, Slack requests, that sort of thing, with the employees who are constantly inputting for us into the task database, our requests. And now, instead of us sending an email, we're going to the manager request list and typing it in ourselves and saving them the time from doing it. So we're actually not using the task database because I think the last update was like in August. So we are saying that it's not having to happen there. And then, for example, we're seeing one of our employees, she was entering things requested by her on the manager task list. So like, I mean, that makes sense because she's actually doing it and she's asking us to do something. So it is a request. So we'll probably kind of come back to that and figure out what's working best with that. But for now, at the moment, it seems to be that we've migrated to this. And that's okay, because I still have a good bird's eye view of what's going on. And all of the things on the manager task list, the request list, are still associated with projects. Yeah. So I can still see what's going on with projects, which I think is good. Rusty, what do you think?
Well, I think that the great thing about Notion is I think the best way to get into Notion in the first place is just keep on trying different things until you figure out what works best for you at a different time, just kind of like any new tool that you adopt. And so I think the master task database was great at one point, and now that it seemed we needed to move on to something else. And I think with all the different views that we have created in our staff request list, we lean more to that every day as an everyday place to go for us, at least. It would be interesting to ask our employee where they go more often than we do. So this is more from our perspective of where we go. And so, but Notion is great because you can just kind of rinse and repeat, and this worked really well in this particular instance, and it might have a different purpose that you can add on to later on and always keep on changing.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I saw another question come up. I was just looking through the questions there quickly, and I don't have it bookmarked. So on Rusty does, I probably will tell us, we won't try to demo it. Rusty put together a really great version of because the question was an academic CV, putting one in Notion. And we don't have a full CV. I figured you might have it bookmarked, but I've renamed it and now I can't remember the name. So we'll have to figure out later what I do with it. But we created and Rusty created a digital version of basically all of our presentations and publications, and our digital academic portfolio. So this is something he spent an awful lot of time putting together for us. And it's great because I think like the hashtag I've seen online is like the no code movement and being able to do things that don't require coding. So Rusty, do you want to talk about everything that's here?
Yeah, so I've been the one who has to update all our CVs all the time in Word, and it got to be very difficult to share that with Monica at times. So we put it all sorts of different places, and it never seemed to be the right one that she was looking at. So it was like, you're going to be in Notion all the time. We should put our academic portfolio in Notion. And so one weekend I played with this, and it started out just as a basic table. And if we can actually, I think it would start at one point. So they kind of started like this, and just kind of started building, and then Monica just started to realize, this will actually help us keep track of the author profiles is a big thing in academia and ORCID and different other tools, but it was in how do we promote our scholarship. And Notion turned out to be a really great way of, after I put all our CV in here, that keep track of like where do we promote this, and how often do we promote this, and what do we do with this. And so this is a social table for that, keep everything in one place. But then presentations, publications, I just love, let's see if we go to the right one. That's the original one, and it's great with all the different little things. It's pretty simple, but it ended up looking quite.
Well, and one of the things that's great about this is if you're interested in writing and publishing in an academic space, oftentimes you'll need pretty quick access to citations of what you did before, because our work all builds on itself. And generally speaking, so we're constantly citing ourselves, which I know makes us sound super full of ourselves, but it's actually really fun because we've been able to say like, we did work in that space. And of course, we always like head tout to the individuals who did it before us, right? The seminal work. But at the same time, we're able to say like, we've done this work before in this particular context and cite ourselves. And it's actually important to do so you don't accidentally plagiarize your own work. So,
and I think the sharing feature of this is really neat. So Monica mentioned that we're fortunate to be on a lot of different committees and service committees right now, but sometimes they ask her, what's your past scholarship? So this was a really easy way of having this digital display of all the things that we've done and share that with people fairly easily without having to code anything. So we found that the traditional CV wasn't as impactful as we had as it had been before. And so this has been a really good way of keeping everything and have something that's visual, that's no code, and have it all in one place that we can share quite easily.
What I would love to do is to be able to have, and I know there's a plugin, but I haven't gone into work quite right yet. So maybe Murray has suggestions here. I've seen timeline features because my understanding is eventually there might be some sort of really cool timeline. And I want to call it a Gantt chart, but I don't know if exactly that's what the model is going for. But any idea when that's happening? Because I think that would be really cool.
Oh, I know. They sent that little teaser out. I think it was like over a year ago, and everyone's been kind of waiting for it since. So I don't know when it's coming. Hopefully soon. I have a feeling that once API comes out, and that's going to be not too far after. So
yeah, no, we're super excited about that. And since I know initially when we logged on to this today, I noticed someone from Notion, I think, was just saying hello in the chat. So I was like, if anyone from Notion is here, please make it so we can send emails to Notion. I'm totally taking
I know.
Because if I could send emails to Notion, I would just be thrilled because the workflows I've established to do that involve things like printing to PDF and screenshot and copy pasting and things like that, just because there is so much, unfortunately, work that will always, I think, especially in higher ed, be an email. I've got workarounds, and it's because I choose and I want to live in Notion, so to speak, for my work. But yeah. If Mr. or Miss Notion person who might be available in the chat today, plus 1,000 for the emails. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's when those things that you do 20 times a day, they kind of add up over time, right? So that's definitely a huge one. I think like some calendar integration and email stuff is pretty key, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. And I mean, you know what, though? I've been super impressed with how quickly they are spinning out updates, because yesterday's update that went live with the, because I'd already seen backlinks showing up, but now that we can do some things with, I posted on my Instagram yesterday, the ability to be able to really quickly inline create a sub page or a sub entry within a database, I think is super powerful. So that's just going to speed up our workflow even further, because I used to really hop around a bit between databases, but this I think is just going to make it much faster.
Awesome. Another question popped up. Do you have examples of lesson plans or syllabi that you've created on Notion?
I don't yet. And that's because I haven't actually had a new course to develop. So I've been teaching the same course at the college since 2008, and I've continued to update it, etc. But it's lived honestly in kind of a non-cute Word document that's our accessible syllabus template. I can't even say that, like, you know, it's the awful academic template, because my office made it for them. So if it's bad, it's because I made it. But it's just a standard template that we've had, that we had to make sure that the screen readers would work with and that sort of thing. So I haven't done that. I think that that's on my roadmap for going forward, especially if we move forward with doing some things with students with Notion. I am bouncing around the idea with my students of a productivity club. I think I have to come up with a new name for it, because when I asked them, it was crickets, guys. No one wanted to do it. I was like, would you guys be interested in having this tool for free that would teach you how to? And I thought I made it really undergrad friendly. It was crickets. And we were using Teams to talk about it, Microsoft Teams, because it's an improvement for us over our discussion forums. And the only thing that made them laugh is that when you post in a Teams thread, and if you add a comment to the initial post, but then you delete the original post, the comment still stays. So I'm like, okay, guys, I'm going to do that thing where I delete my original post because I'm super embarrassed and no one replied, but I'm just going to admit that I'm embarrassed here. Everybody liked that post. But like no one liked the initial request. So clearly it was not something
not worded or framed correctly.
Yeah, like I just didn't sell it well enough yet. I think probably the fact that I called it Productivity Club is what made it burn. But I have to come up with another way to call it. So
find your people.
I know, right?
One of the other final questions that came up was, it's a little more related to the technical features, but Gray said, not sure if we're getting into rollups, but I'd love to know if there's a way to access files like images that you bring in through a rollup. Please prioritize academic oriented questions first, though. So I think that's the last question anyway.
I'm curious with the question that came in, and I think it's still there because I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you. So I don't roll up images. I'm not sure. Is it possible to do that? Because I was thinking the other day, I have in my own personal space, I save a picture every day. Like I upload a picture that I took through the day. So I have like a photo of the day sort of thing. And I'm not sure, is it possible at the end for me, like, because I have a yearly database that brings things in, could I bring in all of the image files as a roll-up?
I don't think so, but I'm open to being corrected on that. Danny, do you know if you could do that? I feel like Danny's pretty savvy on
sounds cool.
roll-ups. Yeah.
I
And
also know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you do it as an image attachment? Like you actually have a field that is?
So I do like a file upload attachment. And the one thing because he's saying it would bring up the nasty looking link. I appreciate that. The one thing that I find that is a little bit limiting with the file, like the attachment file property, is that it only will show one at a time. And when I say show one, I mean, if I've set up a gallery view and I set the property to display the file, it's only going to show me one of the files that's there, which makes sense, right? Because it's not going to do some kind of weird, like multi-image thing. Like I wish it could make a pretty Canva banner for me, but that's something else. I would assume I would probably need to make additional property fields and have like one file per if I wanted to somehow display those in a more dynamic way. But I think I would still be stuck with the property of a gallery card, for example, only picking one particular prop. So It doesn't seem like that's something that's quite there yet. I'm open to finding other ways of doing it though, because I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's other, like, you're a Power Notion user too. Are there other features that you're like just kind of waiting for or would also just make your life so much easier?
So definitely email. I'm going to say that one again. People are going to be like, what's wrong with that girl? But no, I would love to be able to print to it. I'm going to say the generic answer of I'm excited for the API. And I'm saying generic simply because I don't really know how to work with API. I have people who work with us that know how to work with API. Rusty's laughing because he thinks that I don't know how to do it. But there are things that I would love to integrate with it. So for example, I would love to be able to integrate some of our Tableau dashboard content with it or push vice versa to it. Like, I think that would be pretty cool. I think it would be interesting to bring in some of the content we have in a system called LibApps that Rusty manages. It's basically all of our library content, but I use it as a CMS. So it's like WordPress on really fancy WordPress, but for libraries. So if it could integrate that in that system has a lot of API functionality. So if there were ways to link the two, I would say that right now, it's not a system that we use fully across the college, meaning Notion. So until it was something that we kind of deployed college-wide, it wouldn't be something that I would look into saying integrating student data because we have lots and lots of different rules about that and different regulations with FERPA, et cetera. So we're super careful to not put student data in here when it comes to things like that, just because it's not a system that's considered approved for that. And it's probably similar to like financial or legal sectors when you have to be careful about where you put stuff.
Right. That makes sense.
Rusty, what about you? What do you want to make it see Notion do?
I would love this. I mean, one of the things that we did not share was we used to use Excel for all our user usage statistics. And so I would love to see an API that can go into Tableau because we love creating dashboards like of real-time data. And so we put all our usage statistics back about the last 10 years now, and we broke it up by different service, and so that it's made life a lot easier, and now we can run reports a lot easier, and it's easy to export, and that's great. But I would love to see some sort of API that we could use with Tableau so that we can input in Notion and then we can look at it and play with the data more in Tableau.
And I will say, I noticed Prescott, but I think he left, but he mentioned a faculty annual report that he has to put together. And we have to do something similar, even though we're administrators. And it made my life so much faster and easier to do it this year because my annual review is always July 1st. And I usually have to turn things into my supervisor in May. And this year, because I had tracked in my personal journal, I was flagging things with like a 5-star method. When I was like super proud of something, I'd put like 5 stars next to it. I was able to filter really quickly and find the associated projects. And then I totally geeked out and made an infographic about all the things I'd accomplished in the last year. And of course, put a cute little avatar of my head at the top. So I know when they do certain things, they're probably like, who does this? And I'm like, me, because I have fun doing that kind of thing. But it worked out well. So the review was good. So I'm going to say it's all because of the infographic in Notion. Right. But it made it much faster because honestly, in the past, I might have been trying to think about, well, what did we publish? Now I can go to Rusty's dashboard for that. What are my big projects that I did that I'm super proud of, that I think that not only am I proud of because, I just did a darn good job with it, but because we made a big impact across the college. Like I tried to toot the horn of the people who work with us more so than mine, because I hope that means that I'm doing a good job leading them if we're able to put together big projects that make an impact. So this was just a much faster process for me than in the past, because sometimes I would truly be like, I don't know, I did a lot of stuff. like, because I know we all do a lot of things, but this just made it much clearer for me. And it was maybe an hour and a half putting it together
Wow.
as opposed to like 5 or 6 hours over a couple days. So
Yeah.
Amazing. I think that's one thing I've really loved about Notion is we kind of forget what we've accomplished and forget what we've done. And so just even the basic tracking of kind of your things that challenged you, things that were, huge accomplishments that you want to celebrate, and just how you felt about certain things. And you can piece that together so much more easily and get a lot more interesting insight and data into your own behavior. And
I think that when it's visually appealing, it makes you want to go into it more often. So it's very hard to go into it, want to go update your CV that's in a Word document, and you have to format it.
Yay.
Oh, that's fun. And then you forget to do it for a couple months, and then it's review time, and I have to fix that. So it's a lot easier to just when it's all in one place. And you have a system going on. It's like, oh yeah, that's actually fun. It's neat. It's visually appealing.
Those emojis, right? They matter.
There's going to be more in that dashboard soon. That
would be, and I know we're at the hour, but I'll say that would be my other plug for Notion if they could do this. If we could mathematically, easily, for formula challenged folks like me, associate a number value with an emoji. Ooh. So for example, 1 sunshine is 1. It would know 2 sunshines is 2. I look at Rusty, 3, 3, 4, 4, etc.
Yeah.
And why? Because then I could do means. I could do averages on how I felt over a period of time. Now, I think there's some way to mathematically formula this, but when I start thinking about it, I'm like, it's okay, I'll just count my sunshines.
Yeah, I'm exactly.
But if there would be a way to do that, I think that would be really cool.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's my final request. Notion evals and numbers.
We'll pass it on to the team. No, this is really great. Thank you both so much for sharing all of this behind the scenes. And where can people find you online if they want to see more about your Notion for Academics and other ways that you're using it?
So the best way to find us is on our website. So I'm going to drop that in the chat. So it's reachavimaholic.com. And definitely because we have 2 international names, they're not the easiest way to pronounce them or to say them. I'm the Reachavi, he's the Maholic. And so that's our website. We're both active on Twitter. I'm at Monica Reachavi, so I'm putting that in the chat. And Rusty, if you want to drop yours in the chat too. And that's probably where we are the most. I'm also on Instagram a fair amount of the time. But yeah, we love helping people learn how to use Notion, particularly people who might think that it's just too challenging to get started, because I think that a lot of times sometimes there's over fatigue with too many resources, right? It's like, well, what do I watch first? So we try to break things down in a simple way. And we always point people in Marie's direction, because I've learned so much from your videos. And I'm just super grateful for how kind you've been and open with sharing things, because especially in the tech community, I think everyone's so kind. And in the Notion community, people just get so excited to show how to do different things.
I
know. And I'm not sure if Danny is still there, still on the chat, but his videos just made me smile. And I will be the first to tell you, I have watched several of your videos, Danny, and I didn't really understand some of them, but I watched them again because you were so enthusiastic, and then I could do it by maybe the 3rd or 4th time. So I just thought they were really fun to watch, and he has just this great energy and enthusiasm. So I found that with so many people in the Notion community, it's just been great to experience.
Amazing. This has been super fun. All the month of September, we've been doing sort of school-based, back to school themes. And so next week we have Nicole is going to be sharing how she developed her online course. So more from an entrepreneurial course delivery perspective next week. So join us next week if you are thinking about delivering online courses or even planning online courses, not so much from an academic perspective, but there's always something to be learned, right? When you watch how other people do this stuff.
Oh, definitely. We're excited to watch that one, because I would love to see how someone implements a quasi LMS within Notion, because LMSs are my bread and butter. So that would be really fun to see. Yeah,
very interesting. Well, thank you so much for both of you being here today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Bye, everyone. Bye.